Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host, Dan Maisey, dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. We welcome Gemma Rushworth, Client Services and Operations Director at Engage Digital Partners, to the pod today. Gemma brings a wealth of experience and a proven track record in the digital media strategy and operational management landscape, and is a leader known for her strategic insights and effective management. As part of her day-to-day, Gemma oversees various critical departments such as operations, client services, content hub, and audience development. Her role involves improving organisational efficiency, client management, and enhancing team performance. Previously recognised as a 2017 Sports Industry Next Gen leader, Gemma's career showcases her commitment to innovation and excellence in the sports and media industries. With substantial experience managing large-scale digital projects and leading teams across diverse content production environments, her insights will offer invaluable perspectives on recruitment and talent strategies. And I'm sure to listeners who are currently navigating the complex landscape of job search in the industry at the moment, will be able to get a lot from this conversation. I know I will. Gemma, welcome to Talent Talks.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you? You well?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good, thanks. I'm just currently in the middle of a big recruitment drive for my own maternity cover. So you've come to me at a very appropriate time to chat about recruitment.
Good. I'm looking forward to digging into that in a bit more detail. So let's get straight into it. We asked this to each of our guests to begin with. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired? And do you have any lessons learned?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the lessons you learn from being hired are probably the most important ones to take into your own processes. And I would say that being clear about the process from the offset is quite important. So if this is a more senior role, you're probably going to have a lot more stages and need the candidates to meet a lot more people. So be clear about that from the start. How long could this take? How many people might they need to see? Because you're just going to get asked those questions back if you don't offer up that information. And then the same from the point of view, if you're going for a role, you want to know really what you need to put into this and who are the types of people you're meeting. And I'd also say the biggest lesson learned from a hiring point of view is never ask the question, tell me about yourself or your career to date, because I've just had far too many examples of people talking for up to 15 minutes in some instances without letting me interject. And actually those broad questions can be useful for getting quite an overview of a person's character, but you can also really run the risk of just hearing everything that's on their CV. So try to be focused at the start.
Well, I like that. I like the latter part of that in terms of the tell me about yourself question. I think that's quite a good point and quite an amusing point. And I think ultimately it comes down to the question of what are you looking for when you're in those interviews with the people, and obviously that changes as you go through the process. But certainly in that first one, when you would ultimately potentially ask that question the first time you're meeting them, etc., what are you looking for from them, and how is it different? What would you ask instead in order to give you a bit of colour to the CV potentially, but not just repeat exactly what's on it, because ultimately you've already read it and that's why they're in that room anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. If I kind of start with kind of how you would maybe ask that question differently, that's probably looking at something along the lines of, tell me about the sort of experiences or skills you've had in X role. I might pick out as a certain position that they've had, or ask a little bit about what a typical day might look like, that sort of thing. And then would kind of pick out other areas on the CV for follow-up questions about that I might want to know a little bit more about, particularly because we'll probably get a lot of people that come to us with very different backgrounds. So I joined Engage from a TV background, and I remember going into the process thinking, oh God, how am I going to showcase that I know what I'm doing, even though I'm going into something totally new for me in digital, and actually being able to kind of look at what the potential things are on someone's CV that could help them in the role that they're going for are really important. And then when you talk about what qualities I'm looking for, I always say I'm going into an interview looking for an engager, which in my mind, it's essentially, it's really personality driven. So I really want to look for someone who'll fit in with my team and be a team player. I doubt swearing is permitting on this, but I do have a no.
No, it's absolutely fine. Don't you worry.
Okay, right. Well, in that case, I have a no dickheads rule. That is literally the one thing that I've left so many interviews where you think, okay, they've ticked this, and this box, but if you just think they're going to be arrogant or upset the apple cart a little bit with your team, like they're a no-brainer. They don't get through the next round to me, because I think to get to the stage of an interview, you know that someone has read the job description and ensured that their CV and application will get through that tick box challenge. So actually the interview process itself, I do find to be a lot more of a chemistry driven session.
Yeah, I like that approach at the end again, the chemistry side of things, because if you look at that from a partnerships perspective, actually, a lot of certainly advertising world, and much more prevalent in the advertising world, it's a really key part of pitch processes is those chemistry sessions between agency and client. And ultimately, it's still an interview. You're still working out what you're trying to do, and it's still relevant in this case in the sense that if you haven't got that chemistry with the people you're going to work with, then it can be a challenge. On the flip side to that, you also don't want to be bringing in people that are exactly the same as you and bringing in yes people, as it were. So how do you make sure that whilst they fit in and they're engagers, which again is, I love that term, how do you make sure that they are challengers, if you will, and actually won't just go, yeah, we can do this, this is fine, this is all good. We'll actually go, well, actually, is there a better way of doing this? How do we make sure that we're being as efficient as possible, or how we make sure we're delivering as much as possible for the client and looking at things a bit differently?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whilst, yes, I want people that are going to get on with me and my team and be that personality driven, I think it's quite important to consider what some of the gaps are in your current team as well. So I might look at kind of recruiting one role and look at the job description myself and think, if someone can't do or is weaker in X, Y, and Z, have we got other people in the business that can do that? So actually, we would be looking at it from the point of view of a bit of a skills blend. And look, when somebody resigns who is a great asset to your team, I think the only way that you can look at it as a positive is to say, okay, we know that they're great at these things. Which of these things are essential for us to replace? But then also look at it and say, is there something that they weren't as good at that we could do with bringing into the business? And very often as well, if someone resigns who's been with you 3 or 4 years, if not longer, your needs for hiring that role when they joined might be totally different to what they are now. So think about, how has the market changed, or what are the gaps that we've got from a client point of view, or the work that we're delivering that we would try and fit into the business now. So I think sometimes it's dangerous to recruit around other individuals and people that you've got.
Yeah, I think it's always an opportunity to bring in something different. I think we've had a previous guest on that cautioned with that as well, in the sense that you look at what they didn't have, really focus on what they didn't have, and then actually you kind of almost forget what they were really good at, and you don't hire for what they were really good at, you hire for what they didn't have, and then you kind of go through this merry-go-round every single time somebody leaves of, it's very rare that you're going to get someone that can do absolutely everything, and that's kind of not what you want anyway, is it?
Yeah, definitely.
You're obviously quite clearly hands-on, very hands-on in the process within your team and within the company. Is this something that you enjoy? And what is the process? If I was to apply for one of the roles you've got on at the moment, who would I be speaking to? Does it come through you and the other senior people? Are there other members of the team? How does the process work, and how do you look to make sure it's as efficient as possible?
So when I first joined Engage, my role included managing recruitment from end to end, but thankfully that has now changed. We have a people director who we brought in 4 years ago, who was absolutely kind of life-changing for the business and probably one of the best hires we've ever made. So her team will review applications when they come in. And this is if you're applying through a LinkedIn or a traditional way, as opposed to it being a referral. That team also headhunt, and I think that's probably one kind of big change as well, is that when my team or my role included the recruitment process, you were really relying on who was finding you, whereas actually to the point about what are the specific things that I am looking for, the headhunting approach is definitely one that we've relied on more. So when a role becomes available or is posted, someone from that people team will speak to whoever the direct. So if I'm a direct hiring manager, I'll give that brief and we'll just have a conversation about what are the types of experiences you would like someone to have, or what are the essentials, what are the nice to haves, so they can go and find those people. So when we do get to the stage of having a conversation with somebody, that would initially be with most likely the people director or someone else from the people team, depending on the seniority of the role. Then it would move to either a video or sometimes straight to face-to-face interview with the hiring manager. Now, it depends on how senior the role is, but if we are hiring quite a senior role, so kind of head of department upwards, other senior leaders in the business would get involved. So it might be that I come in at the next stage after that, and they are genuinely a lot more kind of chemistry sessions where a direct line manager would say, here's my one person I recommend, or here are the two that we're down to. And then you'd get people in to have a bit more of a face-to-face, just chat conversation about how the business runs overall. Some of the more kind of, when I say operational, I don't mean operational in terms of my team, but the kind of hands-on delivery roles for clients are largely just managed by the direct hiring manager and then probably the kind of supporting head of department above that as well. So generally they'd have at least 2 interviews, one with HR and the second ideally face-to-face with a direct manager, but something that's a lot more senior might have 3 or 4 stages.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier as well around you get a lot of applicants and a lot of kind of people coming in from different backgrounds. I assume the headhunting approach has a lot to do with that. And how important is that when you're looking at people coming in terms of their backgrounds, their diversity of thought, just standard kind of EDI, diversity side of things as well? How important is getting people of different backgrounds, bearing in mind what we've already spoken about in terms of different thought processes and those types of things? How important is that?
Yeah, really important. And particularly because we're in a creative industry, and you might think again that this only really applies to the delivery roles, but it's actually important across the business that we're making content for people of all different types of backgrounds. And a lot of our clients have got completely different audiences. So particularly when we're looking at those roles of who's going to be making content or defining strategy or being client side, is thinking about who are we making that for, and therefore looking at backgrounds and experiences and diversity that is going to be able to feed into being able to deliver efficient work for the client, because essentially they're the sorts of people that they would want to be making content for. So that is really important. I think we've done a lot of work in making sure the senior leadership team is a lot more diverse, and that has really changed the business in that we have like really just healthy debates is what I would say, and that you do really need the varying opinions, whether that might be because we've got an even split of 3 men, 3 women in our senior leadership team, the kind of background of what we've all worked in, ethnic backgrounds, our ages, and because actually I think some of the younger people on the senior leadership team are closer to everybody else that's delivering the work for us as well. So I think we've seen such better results of being able to change that side of the business because we've felt more connected to the rest of our staff base. And ultimately that's about being more connected to the audiences that we're making work for as well. And I think to be able to kind of make that point to our clients that if their teams aren't as diverse or aren't as relevant for the audiences that we're making content for, to be able to say, look, we've got this person who doesn't need to go and do the research about what your audience want because they're your audience. I think that helps bring an authenticity to the work we're creating.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating approach. You've been engaged now for a number of years, and you mentioned earlier in one of the previous answers around the fact that you used to look after all of recruitment and process. That's changed somewhat now. We brought the new people director in. What are there changes, and what's been the change to your approach in recruitment and actually in the people you're looking for, that kind of talent strategy side of things, from the slightly more startup phase you were in when you joined Engage to where you are now in a much more established business?
I think what's been really interesting is how kind of cyclical recruitment is. When I joined, we were very much a kind of short-term freelance kind of setup with very few full-time members of staff. And that was one thing that we really changed, because we were spending a lot of kind of operational and resource time looking for people to deliver projects on kind of short-term agreements, or we'd get a last-minute edit request in from one of our clients that needed an ad hoc additional piece of work that then we had to kind of panic, go and find someone who could actually deliver that work. So we kind of did some resource planning around, well, how much of X type of work would we need each month to justify a full-time hire? And obviously a full-time hire is cheaper than paying the day rates if you have got a certain amount of their capacity covered by client work. So we changed to kind of bring in a lot more of a fixed term or staff base rather than freelance. And actually, we then kind of moved to an approach of, right, we've got these teams of people, who's managing them. So we built out our kind of middle management layer, so good heads of departments or senior managers. And then we've actually found that we've kind of gone full cycle. And yes, we still have that layer, but those managers are responsible for flagging when they need more resource. And we are bringing in shorter term contracts or freelancers to deliver certain project work, because we found that it was so up and down with the staff base of the work actually being there to cover all of their capacity. So I think it's been really interesting to see how we kind of go in phases. And I think you've mentioned before around kind of looking for consultants, and that's something that we're not afraid to look at now. Whereas I think previously we always thought there's such effort goes into onboarding a member of staff. We want to be able to have these consistent long-term teams, but actually being able to know, well, what gap do we have in our staff base that could actually be filled by a consultant instead, is something that we're looking at increasingly more at these days as well.
Yeah, I think the kind of flexible approach, I think, is a really interesting model. I think I personally think it's a very good model to look at, because as you say, you don't necessarily know all the time what the client's going to want. You're pitching for business, or your company are winning business all the time as well. And I think there is a more traditional view of, we've got to bring people in because they're going to fit the culture, they're going to fit the values, they're going to be the right people, but we need them in yesterday and we need them to come in right away. So we're going to just do this really quickly, get this person in, and it'll be fine. And actually, without kind of taking the time to think about who they're bringing in, you tend to then potentially see either the same people going from role to role, but the same type of person from going role to role, which again comes back to the kind of discussion we had around the diversity and the difference in background that we've discussed earlier. And I think actually being open to the use of consultants and freelancers to not fill a gap, but to steady the ship, and to go, right, actually, you know what, this is the project that we need help on. And that might be, this project is 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks, whatever it is. And it might lead actually to a full-time job, depending on if it's right for the organization and right for the freelancer or consultant. But fundamentally, what you're doing is giving yourself time to find that right person. And it's interesting to hear your journey in terms of doing that to begin with, moving slightly more in-house, fully in-house, I should say, and then going back to having a bit more of a flexible, almost kind of hybrid approach. Assuming that having gone back to it, and this is potentially a leading question, that is a better approach for you, Engage, or are you still assessing how it's working?
I would say it's a definite role by role approach to it. And I would bucket roles into 2 categories. One, what needs to be long term, what needs stability, what needs continuity. And then what can be solved with a short term fix. So we might instantly replace one lever with a trusted consultant or freelancer that we already know, where we'll say, right, come in for 3 months whilst we work out what we need. Particularly if it's someone that we've already worked with before, it is essentially like getting an old member of staff back, where you don't have to do the whole onboarding process and they can come in and really deliver the work that needs to be done at that time. And then I think there are others that you really need to just take the short-term pain on if you can't find the right candidates. And that probably kind of alludes to, like, I'm sure we've all had a few panic hires that we've made in our careers. And I think a major lesson I took from one or two that we've had is that there are going to be some jobs that are absolutely fine for short-term solutions, and then others that it really benefits for you to just be patient with to find the right person. And actually, I would say that in my client delivery side of the role, that is bring in short-term people, and then you can work out what you need. And it might be that person you've brought in a short-term basis is the person you need. And there are others where you've just got to take the short-term pain of being a person down, because that's the person that is going to require more onboarding because they're business specific rather than specific to a technical capability. And they're the ones that are worth waiting for. Yeah. And I guess this probably comes back to something that I was advised when I first joined Engage. Actually, I referenced earlier that when I joined Engage, I made a slight career change. I was going from TV production to an operational role in digital. And I was told when you start a new role, there's a curve where at the start of that curve, the company invests more in you than they get out of you. And then as the onboarding process continues and you've been there a number of weeks, months, that curve starts to even out and you deliver more than what energy the company puts into you. And you'll know if a hire isn't right if you're still putting more into them than you're getting out of them after a certain point. And those people most likely weren't right in the first place. And that curve process is going to be a lot shorter for less senior members of staff. And the more senior you are, then the company does need to invest in you in terms of showing you what the background is and what they want for you to get out of the role, for you to then to be able to say, well, this is my long-term vision and this is my long-term strategy and this is how I'm going to implement it. So I think, and that would be advice that I would give to someone starting a new job. No one expects you to come in on day one and know exactly what you're doing. So I think those roles where you've got to give a little bit more, get more out of them in the longer term, are the ones that are just worth waiting for.
Yeah, no, I really like that analogy, and I think it is an investment. It's an investment on both sides. It's an investment in the company, quite literally, bringing somebody in from a kind of salary, overheads, etc. perspective. But it is an investment, and it should be treated as an investment from the employee side as well, because you are going in there, and ultimately, if you want to be successful, you need to be adding value. And I know you said around you're not going to know everything from day one, but the more you can show your understanding of the company and understanding of the role and actually kind of do a bit of, it might be wrong, and it doesn't really matter if it's wrong, as long as you're showing that you're offering an opinion on what and how you can add value to the role as specifically, and actually kind of invest time from an employee's perspective or a candidate, if you before employment, to go, I really want this job, and this is how I would add value to you by doing X, Y, and Z, or by challenging, or whatever that might be. I am conscious of time, Gemma, and you've given up enough of it now. So I am going to move on to the final 3 questions that we ask every guest. These are our quickfire questions, and it's the same questions to each one. So we'll start with the first one. What is the most frustrating thing about recruitment?
People who apply for jobs that they're not really qualified for. So I'm all for taking a punt on something that you don't quite tick all the boxes for, but recruitment teams really face a challenge to find good candidates when they have to eliminate ones that aren't worth your time in the first place.
Yeah, I think the LinkedIn easy apply button is one of the worst things that's ever been invented. And number 2, who has been, and you don't have to name them, but you are more welcome to, who has been your best hire and why?
I've actually referenced this a couple of times. So our people director at Engage, Sharon Adoffin, so that was a role that I thought to be introduced as we grew as an agency, and it really showed the worth of investing in someone who concentrates on talent. So that role combines being involved in the day-to-day conversations about business priorities. So she really takes valuable insight into what we're looking for and thinks outside the box for new hires, because she's exposed to that area of the business. And I think it just shows you really can't neglect hiring because people make a business.
Love that. And the final one, what is the one thing you would change about the recruitment world?
More openness about salaries, actually, on both sides. So I do think employers need to do more to state a range, which might be wide, of course, and employers to be honest about what they currently earn and what they want and why they want it, and why they're justifying that price tag.
I love that. And I think out of all of the ones that we've done so far, I think that is the most succinct quickfire questions we've ever had. So appreciate that. Well done. Gemma, thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I know we've kind of gone from topic to topic, but it's been really interesting. I think the listeners will take a huge amount from it. So thanks again. Thank you for coming on Talent Talks. It's been great.
No worries at all. Good luck with it.
Thank you.